we're going to dive into the sermon. We're gonna look at Luke 19, where it tells a story of Jesus coming down the Mount of Olives and going into Jerusalem. And some things that have always intrigued me about this passage is like, why do we see so much joy? Why do we see these people so joyful where they're throwing their cloaks and just worshiping him? And then a few days later, we see them going from Hosanna, praising the high God, to saying, crucify him, give us Barabbas. Like, why do we see that in just a few short days? What happened in these few short days? And so I hope to unpack that for us today, guys. Why was this day any different than all the other days they've seen Jesus? What was different about this day? I think the difference was Jesus was saying, he's announcing that he's a different kind of king. That he values people over policy. That he values compassion over the code. That he values peace over power. And I think that's what makes him different on this day. That he values people over policy and power over peace. So let's jump right into Luke 19. It says, after Jesus had said this, he went on ahead, going to Jerusalem. As he approached Bethpage and Bethany at the hill called the Mount of Olives, he sent two of his disciples, saying to them, go to the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you will find a colt tied there, which no one has ever ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anybody asks you, why are you untying it? Say, the Lord needs it. Those who were sent ahead went and found it just as he told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners asked them, why are you untying the colt? They replied, the Lord needs it. They brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt, and put Jesus on it. As he went along, people spread their cloaks on the ground. When he came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory to the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, even the stones will cry out. You guys got to remember, up to this point, they've only known two kinds of rulers. The Jewish people only knew two kinds of rulers. The first one was King Herod. And if you know anything about King Herod, you'll know about the Christmas story. And that King Herod was so drunk on power and so paranoid that he ordered the executions of all male boys, the same difference, right? Male children under the age of 2. Some scholars have said that they could say he killed maybe 2 or 3 dozen little boys that day. And if you sit on the Mount of Olives and you look over to your left, you'll see this hilltop fortress called Herodian. So not only would King Herod have property in Jerusalem, but he would also have in Herodian. And it's a constant reminder that the Jewish people were always under the thumb and under the rule and under the oppression of King Herod. The second ruler they would have known is Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate is a direct representative of the Roman Empire. And we know how they treated the Jews back in the days. There was a lot of oppression there. But if you look at the old gates of ancient Israel, you'll see just on the edge, on the outskirts of Jerusalem, is this military complex. And this military complex would overlook where their worshipers would go to worship that day. I kind of envision it like a prison where you have those towers on the corner with the guards with guns watching inmates to make sure nothing got out of hand. And that's the same idea, that the picture I'm trying to paint is that you have this Roman Empire constantly casting a shadow over this nationalistic idea that the Jews had. But just like Herod, the Romans were masters of torture and cruelty. Historians, I think we like to think, when we just think of the crucifixion, that it's just 3 people who died on a cross one day, one of them being Jesus. But no, historians will say dozens and dozens and hundreds of people have been crucified violently. So keep in mind, the only rulers that the Jewish people have known are these type of rulers. It's these authoritarian dictators who spare nobody to maintain power and control over people. And it's against this backdrop of abuse of power that we see Jesus coming down the Mount of Olives riding on a donkey. If you want to impress or intimidate people, a donkey is not the first animal you're going to pick. During the time of Jesus, nations and royalty would import horses from Egypt. Now, by a show of standing up, do we have anybody here with Egyptian DNA? By a show of standing up, anybody with Egyptian DNA? Come on, James, I told you earlier. I told you. See, there you go. There you go. And he is one of the finest people in this world. So if the Egyptian horses are anything like him, I'm sure they're amazing horses. If they're anything like Mr. James. No, but even to this day, when the royal family wants to impress people, what do? They use the horses from the best lineage, the horses with the top pedigree and the best DNA. You've never seen an old country western film with John Wayne where he comes blazing in with a donkey, have you? You've never seen that. You've never seen a Super Bowl commercial with donkeys. You've just never seen it. So for Jesus to pick a donkey to try to impress or intimidate people is just completely countercultural. And so why is this significant? We're going to read Zechariah 9:9 to understand why the donkey is significant. He's fulfilling prophecy here, guys. In Zechariah 9, he says, "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." The Messiah is going to bring these two paradoxes together: righteousness and power, and humility and meekness. Let's keep reading. Verse 10, "I will take away the chariots from Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem. The battle bow will be broken. He will proclaim peace to the nations. His rule will extend from sea to sea and from river to the ends of the earth. As for you, because the blood of my covenant with you, I will free your prisoners from this waterless pit. Return to your fortress, you prisoners of hope. And even now I announce that I will restore twice as much to you." Guys, like one phrase in this I really just want to take a time to shed light on is prisoner of hope. Jesus is pointing out the fact that up to this point, you guys have been prisoners of fear, prisoners of shame, and prisoners of despair. But Jesus is saying, I'm coming in today to make you prisoners of hope. I'm coming to bring restoration. I'm coming to bring change and healing. But why didn't Jesus ride in on that chariot with war horses? It's because he didn't have to. He had nothing to prove. All the victories that Jesus cares about will not be won with a sword. Jesus could have come riding in on a tank, but he didn't. He came in riding on the equivalent of a Volkswagen Beetle with a license plate that says Junebug. I couldn't wait for that one, guys. I couldn't wait. No, but he could have came right on a horse, but he came with a Volkswagen Beetle by a show of standing up. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I literally just thought of that right now. I just thought of that. No, but a Volkswagen Beetle, guys. He also came under the umbrella of peace and not power. That was a bold statement to anybody who was watching. Because the choice of a donkey says, I'm not above you, but I'm among you. It's a different type of power and authority that they've ever seen. And it made this emotional and immediate connection with the people who were there. And because Jesus is coming declaring peace People are shouting Hosanna. People are laying down what they have. Jesus was a new king. He values peace over power. He values people over policy and compassion over the code. They were praising him because some of the miracles, the scripture says they were praising him because of some of the miracles they've seen. So what are these miracles they're talking about? Jesus did a lot of miracles, a lot of miracles all over the place all the time. But I think the ones that he did in Jerusalem mattered the most. And I want to just go over a couple of those with you guys so we can just glean a better understanding of why are they praising him? What praises? Like what miracles did they see that he was doing? And in order to do that, we need to roll all the way back to when David conquered Jerusalem. We're going to read 2 Samuel 5:6. Now, we're getting through this pretty quick, guys. You might get lunch before 11 o'clock. I prepped a lot for this sermon. My wife, George and Karini, were fortunate to sit and listen to a bit of my sermon the other day. But I realized just the way my brain works, that I'm going to have to be disciplined in my time and devote more time to preparing a sermon. So I literally, that is literally my favorite word if you guys have ever hung out with me. I literally say literally a lot. But I hand wrote my sermon with a pencil and a pen. My wife had to go find an eraser, had to find a pencil, had to find a sharpener. I'm not kidding. I was going to take a picture and show you guys. Like, she's like, oh, it's here. Like, it was everywhere. But I hand wrote 12 pages. So my first edition of this sermon was 12 pages handwritten. Took hours. The next day I went to work early, so I was working off the clock, and I physically typed up that same sermon onto paper. And then Dustin and I met for coffee, and he's giving me ideas how to be more successful, I don't know, I don't want to use the word successful. That sounds bad in this idea, just more efficient, more calm and things like that. So he's like, what if you do ProPresenter or PowerPoint, keynotes, things like that? So I'm like, okay, cool. So I did. I have 36 slides here, guys, to help me share the message of hope, the message of restoration and healing today. So George and Karini, they live with us. We have the pleasure of living with them and sharing space with them. And I think I text them like, hey, what's the baby doing? Like the baby has anything to do, right? Like the baby has a calendar that it has to keep or something. So I'm like, what's the baby doing? Bring the baby up. And Thais had no idea. And so here they come with the baby, and we're hanging out with the baby, and the baby has a little blowout, but whatever, it happens. It happens, But we're going over the sermon, and they're giving me feedback and things like that. And then yesterday, I go play basketball. Before I went and played basketball, I just start sharing a little bit of the sermon with Thais, and she sits down. I'm like, ooh, do I have an audience? Like, she's busy doing her thing, not feeling good. I'm like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this. So I share a good chunk of the sermon with her, and she gives me more ideas and things like that. And so, this wasn't part of the message today, but I understand that there might be people in this room who, you may not think you're qualified or gifted to do certain things for God, but you just might have to be more disciplined. You might have to devote more time than you're probably prepared to do. I know Mr. Corbin wants to be the best baseball player ever, and he knows he's going to have to devote more time to master his craft. And it's the same. So I just want to encourage you guys, if I feel like God's given you, the words or something to share, like share it. But it just might mean more discipline. So after Thais went to the Costellos yesterday to paint furniture, and I run through the sermon 4 times by myself. 4 times. And I see George and Karini leaving. I'm like, oh, I bet, because they live below us, I'm like, I bet I'm bugging them. Because I literally have my iPad, and I'm walking around just like I'm talking. Just literally, just by myself, like one-man audience. Just walking by, talking, going through my slideshows. And I'm like, oh, I bet I'm bugging them. I'm like, well, they're going to have to suffer with me. They're going to have to suffer through this together. But, okay. So I was able to do my sermon yesterday in about 20 minutes, and I was surprised because it went from 12 pages to 20 minutes. So that's why you guys might get out of here by lunchtime. Okay, 2 Samuel 5:6. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem. So remember, we're going back in history to see David conquering Jerusalem, capturing Jerusalem. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem to attack the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites said to David, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought David could not get in here. Man, and for me, this is so heartbreaking to see that they are using the downtrodden and the marginalized as a punchline to antagonize David. Like, I can envision the king of the Jebusites, the Canaanite king, like bringing all these paralyzed people out, blind, whatever their defect is, like bringing them out, parading them in front of everybody and saying, "Yo, man, you can't even get past these guys. How are you going to get past me and my army and my soldiers?" And that's just heartbreaking because can you just imagine that daily struggle, that daily fight where you have to fight daily for your dignity just to be shamed by leaders in your community? For me, it's just heartbreaking. And the line about the lame and the blind is significant, not just for the pagans, but also for the Jewish people. And I want to read why. So in Leviticus 21, and I feel so bad for Jimmy too. On a side note, Jimmy's like, text me yesterday. He's like, "Hey, do you have your things for the slides?" I said, "Jimmy, to be honest, man, I have zero capacity to think about anything else. Like, I'm just so focused on this, I have zero capacity. So if it's too late, don't worry about it. We'll just roll with it." But Jimmy was a champ, and he's like, "Nope, just send me what you have, and we'll figure it out." So thank you, Jimmy. We love you, buddy. Okay, Leviticus 21. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind, lame, disfigured, or deformed. No man with a crippled foot or hand, or a man who is hunchback or a dwarf. I take offense to that dwarf part because my mom is literally 1 inch away from being a legal little person. Legally, one person. So if she was 1 inch smaller, according to the current law, she wouldn't be able to go into the temple just because she's 1 inch shorter. Yeah, my mom is tiny. How tall are you, Kareen? I'm just kidding. 5, you're taller than my mom. See that? She's taller than my mom. Okay, so nobody who is hunchback or a dwarf, who has any eye defect, or who has festering, running sores, or damaged testicles. No descendant of Aaron, the priest, who has any defect is to come near to present the food offerings to the Lord. He has a defect. He must not come near to offer the food of his God. He may eat the most holy food of his God as well as a holy food. Yet because of his defect, he must not go near the curtain or approach the altar. As so desecrate my sanctuary. I am the Lord who makes them holy. And earlier I said, that these people have no value to the pagans or the Jews. The pagans don't value them because they're considered weak. And the Jews don't value them because they're considered incomplete and unclean. And when Jesus wants to make a statement about what type of kingdom is coming, what does he do? He blesses the broken. He goes out of his way to make a personal connection with the blind and the lame. He takes this whole idea of what it looks like to be clean and whole and just flips it upside down, flips it on its head. The pool of Bethsaida, John 5. I want to share a little bit about this. So we'll read this verse. I'm going to share a little bit about it. And for your viewing pleasures, we will have pictures for you guys to reference. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda. My mouth is dry, guys. Bethsaida. And which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. I am trying to get in. Someone else goes down ahead of me." So we have a picture of the pool of Bethesda. Bethesda? Oh my gosh. Yeah, isn't that the same city in Maryland? Right? Something like that? So do we have a picture? Jimmy, were you able to get the pictures in there? So there should be a picture behind me shortly. Nope. It's okay. There, right there, that one. Perfect. So this pool, it was taught that the tradition of this pool is when this paralyzed individual said, whenever the water gets stirred, so it was taught that an angel would come and stir the water, and whoever got into the water would get that day's healing. So he is saying, whenever an angel comes to stir, I can't get in there fast enough. Somebody else jumps in there. But one of the things I really want to point out in this verse is how Jesus says, "Do you want to get well?" Some people ask me last few days, "Is the woman at the well going to make your sermon?" I'm like, "No, but the word well will, but not the woman, but the word." Few of you people have asked me that. And if you asked us in my original draft, I sent him my original draft. The Samaritan woman was in my sermon, but I took her out, right, Dustin? You remember seeing it? I mean, there was just a quick little blimp of her in there. But Jesus like, "Do you want to get well?" It was a yes or no question. But what does he do? He makes excuses. He's like, "I have no one to help me when I go in. I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. When I'm trying to get in, someone else goes above me." And Jesus is like, "Man, I never asked you about the water. I just asked, do you want to get well?" Because Jesus has means to answer our prayers in ways we've never considered. And if you want to get well and you say yes, it's completely up to Jesus how that happens. And sometimes that may not happen in a way or a fashion that we would hope for. And I love what Jesus says here next. He says, "Get up, walk, and take your mat." Do you guys know what day of the week this miracle happened on? It happened on Sabbath. What's that? I thought I heard you whisper. Oh, gotcha. I hear everything. I hear everything. And what is the law of the Sabbath? You can't do any work. You can't work. I want to explain, there should be a picture of elevator buttons. Even to this day in Jerusalem, there it is. The elevators will stop on Sabbath. They will stop on every single floor. Because to push a button on Sabbath constitutes work. That's how strict the Sabbath law is. In this image, you can turn a key. So for some of the older elevators, you can turn a key. So you're going to tell it to stop on every floor so nobody can push a button. So this happened. So Jesus tells this guy, "Get up, take your mat." Happens on the Sabbath. And to carry your mat constitutes work. Like for us, we'd be like, "Really? I'm just carrying a backpack or something." But for them, it constitutes work. That's how strict the Sabbath law was. John 5:8. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. On the day which this took place was Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is a Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick up your mat and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who made him well. So Jesus heals somebody on the Sabbath, and he does it on purpose to remind people that are watching that he values compassion more than the code, that he values people more than the policy. But Jesus wasn't done with him yet. What does he do next? He re-engages this individual in a conversation, and he says, yes, I healed you physically, but you're still spiritually paralyzed. And he says, if you don't come back to me, something worse than the inability to use your legs will happen to you. Why? Because Jesus doesn't want to heal us just physically, but he wants to sanctify our minds. He wants to bring our souls back to a right understanding. It reminds me of Dustin recently was just educated. It's like, what does the word righteous mean? And every time I was reading this, I just kept reminding myself, it's a right understanding. John 9, Jesus heals a blind man. As he went along, he saw a blind man from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? What's also heartbreaking here, guys, is the disciples didn't have the compassion, empathy, or humanity to see this guy as an equal, or to see this guy as somebody who was created in the image of God. Rather, they just see a theological problem that needed to be solved. Like, what is 2 + 2 or something? Like, it was just a theological problem that had to be solved, and they lacked that compassion. Let's keep reading. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it in the man's eyes. Now, why is this significant? Why am I sharing this verse with you guys? Jesus could have just spit in the man's eyes and healed him. Be kind of gross, but he could have just spit in his eyes and just healed him. And keep in mind, what day of the week did this happen on? This also happened on the Sabbath. So making mud constitutes work for the Sabbath law. And why did he do it? Because he cares more about people than policy. He cares more about compassion than the code. Let's keep reading, John 9. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? Some claimed that it was. Others said, no, he only looks like him. But he himself insisted, I am the man. How, then, were your eyes open, they asked. He replied, the man they called Jesus made some mud and put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed, and then I could see. Where is this man, they asked. I don't know, he said. So there's a pool of Siloam. I want to educate you guys a little bit on the pool of Siloam and the historical significance that it's played in Jerusalem. So pilgrims, before they would enter the temple, they would go to the pool of Siloam to get cleansed. Even some of the, what is the word I'm looking for? Some of the priests, they would have their own washing station in the temple. But whenever they came in contact with a dead body, they were considered unclean. So they would go to this same, oh, it's not up there, my bad. There should be a picture of like little pillars and a water. Yeah, that one. So you could still visit this to the day. Like, it's still there. Has anybody ever seen this in person? Anybody? By a show of standing up. James? No? Yeah, so you can still visit this to this day. And so pilgrims and priests and anybody who wanted to go into the temple had to go wash there first before they went into the temple. That's just a little backstory. I want to go back to the very first verse. I don't know if it's up here or not. But this day that Jesus was coming down the Mount of Olives was a really good day, guys. All he had to do was ride down that Mount of Olives on a donkey and enter into the palace and accept that crown and allow them to anoint him king. All he had to do was smile and do that Miss America wave. Who knows how to do that? How am I doing? Am I good? Any beauty pageants here? Tanya's looking at me. She's like, no. That's all he had to do. He just had to accept that kingship. But what he does, nobody anticipates what he does next. Luke 19, it says, as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, if you, even you, had known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it's hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and your children within the walls. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time the Lord was coming. He's saying, there's a problem with your world view. You guys keep thinking that everything that is broken, everything that is wrong is on the outside of you. You guys keep thinking it's the politics that are broken. It's the system that is broken. It's the Pharisees that are broken. And he's like, you guys just keep wanting me to change your circumstances. And so I can envision Jesus when he's coming down the Mount of Olives and he's entering and he's on that path. I can envision him just putting his face in his hands and just weeping and just crying and saying guys, you just don't get it. You just don't get it. You want me to change your circumstances when I want to change your heart. God knew, Jesus knew that the peace that he was offering was not the peace they were expecting. The peace they were expecting was coming from the absence of conflict, from the absence of pain, from the absence of suffering, instead of the peace that comes from the presence of God. And I think that's why he was weeping. He's like, you guys just don't get it. You just don't get it. He says he wants to speak to our souls. And until we have the courage to admit that we've lost our way, he says there's no hope for you guys. There's no hope for us until we have the courage to admit that we've lost our ways. One short week, we go from Jesus being hailed the hero and people just so excited and screaming Hosanna and praising him for all the things they've seen, to people saying, crucify him. I'd rather have Barabbas instead of this guy. But what caused this group of people to turn so dramatic? What caused them to do that 360-degree turn on Jesus and just start shouting for his death? I think they started to realize that Jesus wasn't the king they were hoping for. I think they were expecting Jesus to ride in and conquer and overthrow the current empire. And Jesus is like, wow, you guys just don't get it. You guys are still missing it. A lot of time we want, if we're being honest, and myself, here's a moment of vulnerability. If we're being honest, I think there's a lot of times in our life where we want Jesus just to make our life more convenient, where we just want Jesus to change the circumstances and not change our hearts or our souls or our minds. And if you guys, like me, there's probably times where we're not completely truthful with God in ways where we have wandered away. And as a result, we're having a hard time finding this peace that God is offering us. And instead of embracing Christ as King, we'll elevate other things. We'll elevate ourselves, other people, other systems, politics, sports. We'll elevate something in place of the one true King. And we just keep getting the same results. But if we want to be a prisoner of hope, we have to hear the truth. Band, you can come back up. I'm right on time, guys. I'm good. I'm right on time. Maybe 2 minutes early. There's one more image one more picture I want to paint. There's a picture of the East Gate in Jerusalem. That one right there. I was going to buy one of those laser pointer things to help you guys follow along, but I'm like, man, everybody in this room is successful in one way or another. They don't need me with a little laser pointing at things. So this is the Eastern Gate. There are 8 gates that surround the city of Jerusalem. There's 8 gates. This one is called the Eastern Gate. This is the gate that is believed that when Jesus came down the Mount of Olives, he would have entered the city through this gate. It's also believed that when the Messiah comes back to rule, he will enter Jerusalem through the exact same gate. And it was Solomon the Magnificent ordered his soldiers to wall up that gate with 16 feet thick cement concrete. Because he heard the rumor that when the Messiah comes back, he's going to come back through that gate. So they're like, we like the kingdom we have. We like the ruler we have. We don't want any other king to come and replace what we have. So he walled that up. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, each and every single one of us in this room have a little part of our own kingdom, a little part of our own life that we have walled off to Jesus. And just like Solomon the Magnificent believed that would prevent, walling off that east gate will prevent the Messiah from coming back and reigning. Maybe we're guilty of that same thinking, that same garbage. And maybe we're just scared to knock that wall down inside our heart, inside our life, and allow Jesus to penetrate that and change us from the inside out. Every day is Palm Sunday, guys. I know we celebrate and we commemorate this first day of Holy Week every year, but every day is Palm Sunday. Every single day, Jesus is marching down that path and saying, will you let me in? We all have a choice. I was telling my wife the other day about communion. And it just really resonated with me. It really stuck with me that what we're about to partake on, Jesus literally started 3, 4, 5 days after Palm Sunday. For me, that was a radical idea. Man, we just do this so often that we could lose the intimacy of it. It could get lost in the weekly grind of, I'm going to take communion, and that's it. Man, but you guys, please, just allow that to sit with you for a second and realize that just 4 days after Jesus enters Jerusalem, he offers his body as a sacrifice to his followers. Also, the other day when George and Karini were upstairs visiting us, they made the connection that there are some churches in Brazil that says you guys cannot partake of this until you've made right, until who knows what theological garbage they're preaching in some of these circles. But the essence of what they're saying is that you cannot come partake of this unless you've done X, Y, Z. And remember, our Savior cares more about people than policy. He cares more about compassion than code. When he was breaking bread with his disciples, I don't see anywhere in that passage it says, Jimmy, you must be perfect before you come and partake. He never says, Thais, you need to do X, Y, Z before you come. And so I just want to challenge you guys today, when you guys come and take this, maybe just sit in it for a moment and realize that this is happening just 2 or 3 days before Jesus is actually killed. And just 3 or 4 days after the message I just delivered happened back then. Dustin, do you have anything to add, buddy? He said he did earlier. No. Guys, so that's my hope on Palm Sunday. You guys know that every day is Palm Sunday. Every single day, Jesus is marching down that path. Every single day, Jesus is asking us to knock down those 16 feet of concrete that we've erected inside of our own kingdom. He's saying, don't elevate these things or these people or these systems above me. Dustin and Glory are going to close this out in 1 or 2 more songs. This next song, I know which one it is, and it is amazing. We are blessed. I want to encourage you guys also that, while you were worshiping together, pray for them. Pray for our leaders behind us. They devote a lot of time and attention and care to our church, and they deserve all the prayers that we can give them. You guys may come, take communion when you're ready, and pray for each other. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.